we're going to go ahead and get started. So as I said, for those that were in the room as we got started, my name is Maddie Shellgren. I work for the Online Learning Consortium, but very privileged to be here today. So shout out to the ShapingEDU team and colleagues there on that space for making Space Camp possible. So today, as you, for folks that really engaged with the abstract, in this particular track, the Education 2020 or 2030 track, we're thinking about what it is like, right? And you would have heard this from Stephanie, right? But what does it mean to not only bring us into and meeting the goals of the Sustainable Development Goal that I know that maps to that particular track, but also like, what do we need to do over the next few years? But likely today, I also wanted to think about what might education look like in 2030. And we're going to be leveraging specifically TikTok as a tool to help explore that conversation and give us a sense of reflection. So I do have some slides. I'll share this with you also, preempting that question. Yes, I'll share my slides to you. They do actually have links to all the TikToks that we're going to watch today. So hopefully those are helpful resources for you all as we go forward. This is me, so I'll leave that up for the sake of the recording here for a second. But as I said, I work for the Online Learning Consortium. And TikTok, I just realized I forgot to change my title on that slide. But what is TikTok? In brief, TikTok is a video-based platform that has taken the world by storm a bit. So these numbers are quite astounding, and I like looking at them, at least for getting a sense of just how quickly popular it has become. So in 2017, it had just about 65 million users, but anticipated for the end of 2022, they're anticipating about 1.8 billion users. So a very large portion of the world is now engaged actively in TikTok as a platform. If we're thinking about reasons why we might care about this platform, these numbers alone do tell a story. That's not the story I want to talk about today, at least in its entirety, but it is a compelling story because when I step back and really think about trends, right? And I said this in the abstract for those that read it, but it really is not uncommon for us to hear like, oh, it's just a trend. But for me, I look at trends and I look at trending technology for a really specific reason. And numbers like these are compelling to me because I said, okay, something's going on here. There's a reason almost 1.8 estimated users are in this platform. Why is that? And we're going to look at another trend in TikTok here as well, or a trend related to TikTok that is not to be confused with the word trend in TikTok communities, right? But another compelling piece of evidence as to why TikTok is something we in the educational spaces should be paying attention to. All right. And do let me know in the chat. I'll just make sure that that's pulled up here. If you have any questions along the way, happy to take those. And if it looks like a pause makes sense. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll say, all right, let's go ahead and hold on that. But related to George's question, right? I at least in part answered that, though I know that might not have been totally satisfactory, right? But numbers do tell us that there's something going on with use of platform that's bringing people to that space. So that is something that always intrigues me. But likewise, as I said, we're going to look at one other thing, and this is the sentiment around I've learned more on TikTok than I ever did in school. And this is what really inspired this session in particular. I've talked about TikTok before as well, but this is something that is very frequently found in comment sections on a whole number of videos. We're going to look at a few of them here just briefly, but the sentiment, right? And as someone that's been working in the educational sphere for a while, when I first saw that, I was like, oh yes, what does that really mean though, right? And of course, I'm not wanting to make a case today that's it, forget LMSs, forget everything else, we're all going over to TikTok. That is not what I'm going to share today. But why are people saying this over and over and over again? And apologies about that. Why are they saying this, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about this here and look at some examples. So let's start off with some examples, and then we'll talk about and explore sort of the why behind TikTok. And begin to tease apart perhaps why this sentiment has come to be. I'm not going to give you all the answers today, right? I am a TikTok expert, just like many of you who might be consumers or creators, right? I am part of the community. I've been experiential in that sense. And so bringing my own state of reflection to you all to invite you into that. All right, so here are 4 initial videos for us to reflect on. We are going to watch these videos as well, just to give you some additional context. But if we were to look at the feedback here, the comments, TikTok teaches me more than college did. All right, so we have it right there. And then this additional comment here, I'll move my cursor so you can see it, but why did I even get a college education, right? I mean, really, right? So that sentiment of like, why did I even go to school? And then looking at this next one, TikTok needs to start a college because we learn a lot on here, LOL. All right, and then my entire childhood is a lie, right? So this sort of sentiment of like, I've believed this thing my whole life. And like, finally I had my moment where I realized like, oh, that's not the case. Here we go as well. My mind is blown. This is simple. The information that the people need, right? 40 years and I'm now learning this, or 46 years and I'm now learning this. And likewise, even looking at this, like, great idea, learning something every new, thank you. We're going to look at one, or we're going to actually watch these really briefly, just so you can get a sense of what these videos are. So where these comments are coming from, and then we'll continue to advance. I do see some of the comments coming in. Thanks, George. I'm glad that I did address that as you were typing, but keep it coming. And if I don't get to a question along the way, I'll follow back through and we can answer them. But let's go ahead. I'm going to switch my screen share here. So if you need to look away for any moment, know that that's coming. But let's go ahead and actually look at and engage with these TikToks. So this is going to be the first one on the left. We're going to go from left to right order and look at what these are all about. Okay, so this one, are you all seeing a window now with TikToks? Wonderful. Okay, so in this particular one, let me just move my Zoom screens. This is about Starbucks. You'll get this very briefly here in this one. You'll see that.
Way, like people like swirl it. That would take me a month.
I dug this cup out of the recycling bin to make this point, but you're swirling wrong. You go like this, you're just mixing the top. And yeah, that's gonna take you 2 months. Grab the right top of the cup, 45-degree angle, and do like 5 big circles, and you're all good. All mixed in there.
All right, I can't attest for you all, but when I watched this, my mind was blown. I was like, oh my gosh, I have literally been doing it wrong my whole life. Right, so I had that same sentiment, that saying like, I just learned something. I genuinely did from this video, okay? So now I know how to properly shake a Starbucks drink. And in fact, if you were to look at this and explore the comment section in this, what it's doing is also tapping into barista culture. And they're like, oh yeah, they teach you this when you become a barista. Like, this is how baristas stir. So sort of welcome public to how baristas actually do stir and sort of technique for stirring drinks within cultures like Starbucks. All right, let's look at this next one here. This is the one where it said, my entire childhood is a lie.
Take them, pop them in half. You're kidding.
I know this shit
I will say he does swear in this. Apologies in advance.
might not work. I know this shit might not work. This shit better not work. This shit better not work.
All right, so for context, right, these are freeze pops. They go by a variety of names. But what people in the comment section were so up in arms about was that most of us were taught to tear, to try to rip painstakingly, or to cut, right? Cut the tip off. Did you all know? If you didn't know, I didn't know, right? That you can apparently just snap these in half and now just have 2 popsicles. No scissors involved, no trying to break your teeth, no messy ripping, right? So another example of community saying like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know there was another way. I didn't know, right? So community crowdsourcing information. Yes, please do. Let's bring that in later. You go get one. We'll try it out live. I love it. Okay, here's another example. This is the third one where people were saying, 46 years and now I'm learning it.
Okay, Jennifer, you're not alone. This is a common question I get and a common problem that people have. The bag that you are trying to put your sleeping bag into has a name and it's called a stuff sack. And the reason it's called that is because the manufacturers want you to stuff it inside there. You don't need to roll it and you don't need to fold it. You just start it at the end so that all the air escapes and you just start stuffing. When you fold and roll your sleeping bag the same way over and over again, it creates a crease, which will affect the R value of your sleeping bag in the end. So once you've got it all stuffed in, all you do is tighten the bag, and there you go. This took seconds, so give that a try.
All right, right. Another good example of something that, I was definitely taught. You have to nicely fold and then roll and hope you did it tightly enough such that 1, it didn't come apart as you rolled, and 2, it finally fit in this bag, right? Right. So unlearning certain things that we might have been socialized into, to realize there are other ways of doing things, perhaps. It's something we see a lot on TikTok. But I shared this example too, because there's more evidence that in the comments, people are saying, like, I can't believe I just learned this. I'm 46 years old and I just learned this. Right. And here's this last example, and we'll look at this briefly. This is a slightly longer clip, so we'll just watch part of it.
The humble pencil sharpener. Not something you would really consider keeping in your kit, but it's only small and light, taking up very little space. On wet conditions, it can be great to expose the dry wood underneath the bark. Using a small twig, you can create very thin, fine curls. If you make enough of these curls, they should be able to take a spark from a ferro rod quite easily. If you use stick, such as pine, it is full of resin, and a thin curl should burn for quite some time.
All right, so one of the things I'm going to do is actually encourage you to watch this back after you get the links to the slides as well, because in this 48-second clip, you learn quite a bit about not only the tool of the pencil sharpener and how it could be remixed, if you will, for another purpose, perhaps not what you were taught it could be used for, but also about types of wood, about thickness of wood, right? And all of these tips and tricks related to starting fires, even with damp wood, okay? So those are those 4 main examples. We're going to switch slides once more and continue through. And I'm seeing some of the comments as well. We'll go back to address some of this, but yes, absolutely agree with some of the potentials, or at least looking at this tool. So, right, I started off with these examples because in each of these 4 cases, you had explicit, and this I will say in terms of how much research it took, I am a consumer. I found each of these within the last 3 days of my own consumption. Okay, they just popped up on my For You page. I'm scrolling, I look at the comments, and I grab these. I have done some additional curating of some additional TikToks you'll see here today, but it did not take me a long time to find examples of TikToks on my own For You page that had comments like the ones you just read, okay, that are on the screen now. So this is very pervasive sentiment of I'm learning more on TikTok than I ever did in school. So for me, as someone that's really invested in educational spaces, that is interesting to me. I need to pay attention to that trend, because why are they saying that? What about this space is compelling them to reiterate this narrative over and over and over again? And beyond that, as a personal user, as a consumer of TikTok, I myself have learned quite a bit. There are whole channels I follow. I'll actually introduce you to some of those here today because of what I learned from those channels. In addition to some of the community building that attendees like George was just commenting about, and some of the advocacy that's happening within this space. So lots of things that we really do need to look at a tool like this. I'm not making the case, and I will not do so today, that we need to teach using TikTok, right? It is a platform that now folks are using it. I'm not against that, not for that in any way, shape, or form. We do see trends in tech, particularly happening in educational spaces. What I will make the case for today is that we cannot ignore what's happening on TikTok if we are to continue to advance our field as a group of folks really interested in teaching and learning. We can't ignore this space. We do have to look at what's happening in there and learn from it, because there's a whole heck of a lot of things we can learn. So, oops, I don't know what just happened. Oh, I accidentally clicked it. Hold on one second, bear with. I clicked the link. Each of those images are linked. So 1 second, let me re-screen share, because that's probably got all messy here. All right, so what we're gonna do is continue to advance through this presentation. And here we go, perfect. Apologies about that. Forgot I hot linked all of those. All right, so why TikTok? Why might this be happening? These are just going to give you some ideas of some of the things that are happening on TikTok. Please note that these are not exhaustive by any means, but we'll look at some examples along the way. So first and foremost, TikTok certainly does make space for agency and personalization, both in terms of consumption, but also creation. So looking at, and this is going to be very light touches here, but TikTok does have an algorithm, and today I'm not going to enter into a conversation, though whole presentations have and do need to continue having the conversations around things like bias, things like discrimination, and how data is leveraged within a platform like TikTok. Absolutely, those conversations need to happen. But the algorithm is, at least in TikTok, it's one of those, it's one of the most complicated in the sense of how personalized the algorithm really is. I didn't believe this myself, right? It was one of those, like, I wasn't sure how to make sense of it myself when I first started reading about when people say how scary the algorithm is, because it's like TikTok knows me better than I know myself. But as an extended user now, since TikTok was created, Genuinely, right? If I shared my TikTok with you and gave you access, you would know a lot about me in a very short period of time by exploring my For You page. Because what the algorithm really does do and does extremely interestingly well, doesn't mean it's exhaustive, but it does custom curate all content for you, even in terms of what new content it shows you. So even thinking about what the TikTok algorithm, how it's set up and what types of personalized pathways it creates for users, that in and of itself would be a tremendously excellent point of reflection. And it's one that I love thinking about, is the power of algorithms and helping to guide user bases, but also even thinking about conversations around, hey, I'm on the wrong side of the algorithm. How did I get on the wrong side of TikTok, right? And thinking about, hey, I've experienced, and when I think about the extension of that to educational spaces, it's, hey, this piece of learning, like, it's really boring to me. I don't like it. Or perhaps like, actually, this is genuinely traumatic for me. How do I shut that off? How do I no longer see or engage in content like this? Right. And I recognize there are pros and cons to educational spaces that might enter folks into a space like that, but nevertheless, it's something we really do need to think about, because there's a lot of work right now happening in customized pathways. And micro-credentialing, micro-learning, and the like, right? So as we, as an educational body, have those conversations, how could we leverage and learn from a platform like TikTok, which actually is very much based around a highly customizable and highly personalizable algorithm? It's very sensitive to the content you watch and how you engage with the platform. Likewise, extending to that For You page, right, is very much, it would feel personal, letting you into my TikTok world, right? Because it's giving you insight into various aspects of me. That I may or may not want you to know about, right? So in that sense too, puts us in a really healthy conversation as a field around what it's like to share learning spaces and share community spaces across groups. Now, creator versus consumer, you'll hear me, and you already have heard me talk a little bit about that today. Just thinking about some of the language here. Is that creators are those that produce TikToks, consumers are those that will watch them and or comment. I'm very much a consumer at the moment, burgeoning creator. There are some communities I'm a part of that I'm gonna start creating for. But thinking about the engagement comparisons as well, right? When we are extending that as a metaphor or even a learning space for who's creating learning artifacts and learning objects in our spaces, who's consuming those. Thinking through that language and really reflecting on a tool like TikTok is something that we could spend a lot of time on as well. And then also TikTok itself is informed by lots of types of engagement, right? So how long I watch videos, how often, and how the amount of times I rewatch a video, for instance, whether I comment, how often I comment, what hashtags I use. Each of those things are actually informed engagement or metrics for, they're informing the engagement metrics, that is. Right, so thinking about even from a metrics conversation, right, TikTok is a tremendously generative platform to sort of explore some of the conversations we're having now actively within the field, right? So wanted to continue to explore here, because there's lots of videos to look at and to learn from. So let's go ahead and dive in. But as I said, very highly personalizable and highly customizable TikTok as a platform is. All right. TikTok, one of my favorite personal things about TikTok is what it helps teach me in terms of remixing, right? And already one of these videos I'm going to show you here today has given me already inspiration in terms of the teaching and learning spaces that I help facilitate and create and or design. So we'll look at some of those. But there is something called a collaboration. There are duets versus stitches. Stitches are where, let's say if Tristan were to create content, I could take a piece of that and spice it into content I create. Duets would be side by side, for instance, right, where I'm reacting. Maybe that happens quite a bit, where you see one given piece of content and then another, and you can, it's almost as if they're creating together, right? And that's very much in the spirit of TikTok, is responding and or extending the conversation or remixing in that sense. And then also we'll look at least one trend that is related to remixing here. But trends are highly popular in TikTok, right? And the platform itself facilitates the extension of trends, right? One person does something and other folks do it in different ways. So let's look at a collaboration. I'm going to go ahead and once more shift my screen share over to TikTok, and we'll go ahead. So this is an example of a collaboration. This is an oldie but a goodie. All right, to provide a little bit of context. So this all started with this cat right here, right? So the cat was drinking and making the noise that you hear, the nom, 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 that noise, right? And then all of these musicians started to add on to it via duets to add different musical instruments, right? And so they did this over and over and over and over and over again until they now compose collaboratively across space and time. So that is in and of itself tremendously cool that this type of platform makes space for that type of collaboration and remixing, right? But across space and time to create an actual piece of music. So I'm gonna just play a little bit more of that, allow you to reflect on, do we actually create teaching and learning spaces? Do we design the space for this type of generative collaboration and remixing? All right, so we'll get small tidbits. I've linked out to all of these for you to really engage. But again, it's really, I just get excited when I think about like, have I done this? Have I successfully designed an assignment, for instance, that makes space for this? Have I done this kind of generative collaboration yet? And if not, how can I, right? How can I leverage the types of tools that I do have access to or I feel safe using to create this kind of spirit? Or folks are just doing this because it's cool, because it's fun, because they think they can generatively add to what's happening. That is a very interesting type of teaching and learning, or a very interesting metaphor to apply for our teaching and learning spaces. All right, I'm going to show you this one. I'm just looking back at my slides about what's next. This is one of my favorite all-time trends. I'm a person that loves multimodality. So this is based on the Adult Swim community. So you might have seen this if you're active on TikTok. But there is the opening to Adult Swim. They play on the actual logo of that. And so this came up very it just happened, right? But the trend picked up. So what you'll see, I'll show a couple of these because this is a very long YouTube video. It's a compilation of TikToks. But what you will see in here is some extremely creative approaches to forwarding the Adult Swim logo. So I'll just play a couple seconds of this one. All right, right. So you get the idea here on both the idea of remixing in TikTok and that culture that's very prominent and pervasive, but also what a trend is like, right? So the same idea over and over and over and over and over again. But as I said, one of my favorite reasons or one of my favorite things about this trend is just how creative they are. So I did link to that. This is one of my favorite compilations because just it like sparks that creativity in me. Is like, okay, well, what would it look like then if I were to take this idea and say, hey, I want you to be inspired by TikTok remixing trends, right? So take this base core assignment and do with it as you will. So long as it meets these basic parameters, like run with it, have fun, right? Be creative. And this very much is one of those examples of like actual art comes out of a trend like this, and the type of the space it makes for creativity and ingenuity and innovativeness is just, it's astounding to me as I sort of sit with and think about this. And you might hear like, I don't know if I'm per se a fan of TikTok, more so a fan of what's happening and what I'm learning from TikTok. I get very excited when I look at just how creative folks are in that space, the space of TikTok. So that is what excites me here. So when you hear that from my voice, that you're hearing that from me. But okay, let's go through a few other things. So we just talked about remixing. What about what's next, right? So apart from remixing, TikTok really does make a lot of space as well for advocacy. George, thank you for already mentioning this with respect to Indigenous communities. Absolutely the case. We'll look at a couple examples of this that I had pulled, I think about a year and a half ago, just in thinking about TikTok. But accessibility, we've got an example on that. We do have an example on LGBTQ+, a happy Pride Month, by the way, for folks, but LGBTQ+ communities and family structures in particular. So we're going to look at those two examples here. But there's a lot of advocacy work happening that's being documented, but also community building around advocacy work right within the TikTok space. Again, we need to surface issues like TikTok censorship, and the algorithms and the ways that the actual infrastructure is supported to either advance certain conversations or to oppress others. But nevertheless, right, we need to think about, if we're imagining community spaces, that the community itself is being drawn to advocacy work. And that's, again, thinking this less about, I'm saying we have to do this work. It's what the community is doing in TikTok. They are remixing, they are advocating, right? So if we're thinking about what learners, what folks, regardless of their age, lifelong learners are actually doing within other user spaces outside of those typically leveraged within educational spaces, these are the types of things that we really do need to pay attention to. So if advocacy work is happening within a platform that folks are generally, I spend time on my own time, right, of leveraging TikTok and engaging in these spaces. So what does that imply about what we do or don't make space for within education, right? That's what I want you to really reflect on. So let's look at these two examples that I've pulled up for you. So again, one's going to show you, it's going to be related to accessibility, and the other one's representation, but with respect to LGBTQ+ family structures. All right, so this one's accessibility.
If you see something and you're not sure why it exists, it might help someone who is disabled. Or it might help an older adult. Or a little kid. It might even help you someday. And some disabilities aren't visible. So you never know who might need some help. We're teaching people about assistive technology. Follow along. If you see something.
All right, and they're not lying, right? Part of their channel is actually dedicated to doing exactly that, right? Teaching folks about assistive technologies, right? And really extending awareness, raising awareness around types of assistive technologies. But what you also heard in this video is part of why this conversation is important, right? Extending that sense of inclusion to, like, could be little kids, this could be folks that are disabled, but it could be also other folks that might need to leverage assistive technology for a variety of purposes, right? So also broadening that conversation in a far more inclusive way around assistive technology. So a lot that they're doing on that channel in particular. And this is the one example I was mentioning about different types of family structures. So I'll play this one. And by the way, that last one was only 30 seconds. And in 30 seconds, they packed a whole lot within one really small video, which is important to this conversation as well.
You know, guys, just between you and me, sometimes I feel like me and my brothers are the only kids who have two moms. I wonder if there were other kids like me. Hey, Olivia. Hi, Olivia. Hi, Olivia. I'm hot, but you're not alone. We have two moms too. I got two mommies too. This is mommy. This is mama. I got two moms too. This is mommy. Hi. This is mama. Say hi. Hi. That just made my heart so full. See? I'm not the only one with two moms. You know, guys,
all right, and we can see some community building happening here as well, right? And again, this is across time. So there are live TikToks, right? But these were all asynchronously generated and produced, right? And then stitched together. This is a good example of stitching, but stitched together into one ultimate video, where this is extending, raising awareness about family structures, but also extending that invitation, right? That, we're not alone in this. There are other folks that have similar lifestyles and similar family structures as we do. Right. And also, I agree, Robert, right? Like, very heartwarming, right? That this is thinking about who is the target audience. It's not just other kids, right? But also folks like me that might be thinking about, like, okay, yes, right, this is a really good educational tool that's extending advocacy for certain communities. So, all right, back to the slide deck. We'll move through and you'll see it's a couple things to think about, and then some videos to exemplify them. But apart from advocacy, community building, leading right from that, we'll look at just one example of shared interest, because each of these really they're examples of community building, the platform itself. There are a lot of ways that we can look at how TikTok leverages its various tools and features for community building. But next one is just a really simple example of the types of, like, really subtle and seemingly insignificant ways in which folks are building community in a tool like this. If you're really interested, I would encourage you to look into TikTok sub-communities and also tagging structures and the ways in which folks use tagging to help make sure that they are reaching the audiences that they're hoping to engage with. But let's go ahead and look at this example. This is a quick one. But it is a community that I'm personally invested in. I coincidentally have a lot of animals. Cats are one of them. I love cats. I love dogs as well. So don't ask me to choose. Right, but super subtle. This one just makes me laugh, right? And as a result, I want to watch more content like this. So I will tell TikTok that by continuing to engage in cat videos, and TikTok answers by giving me more cat videos to watch. So here's this one.
I don't think we're seeing the video yet. I think it's still shared.
Oh, interesting. Hold on. Here we go. Thank you, Tristan.
Yeah,
I can restart this one. Let me restart it. You can see TikTok now?
Yes.
And that's it. Super fun, makes me laugh, right? And I want more content like that, right? But in this one very short video, right, I now feel that much more connected to these cat owners. So thinking about even a lot of the times what I hear about in educational spaces is like what is it my responsibility to be responsive to what's happening outside of teaching and learning spaces? Do I make space for that in my community or not? And in the classroom spaces or the educational spaces that I might be in charge of, might be facilitating, might be overseeing, you name it. And I do want to extend this not just in terms of classical classroom spaces, right? But even conference spaces, educator professional development, leadership spaces, right? How much do we really make space for what's happening and this genuine interest that folks bring into that space? Are we responsive to that or not? Right. And this is one of those examples where, right, like I genuinely get excited and I laugh and it makes me funny or it makes me laugh because I find it funny, engaging in different animal content, animal related videos. Like one person I follow has ostriches and she's hilarious in how she engages with her ostriches. So, right, it's really thinking about, and I also get to learn more about animals, which is great, right? But it might just make you laugh, which I do think puts us in a really interesting spot with those of us really thinking about reflecting on engagement of what does our content do? What kind of experiences do they lead to for the learners that are engaging in them? And what does it mean to make space that so many folks are leveraging a platform because it makes them laugh, right? Because there's some sort of emotive reaction to the content itself that they want to continue to engage with it. And how can we continue? That's one of the tenets of at least some models of engagement. We'll really look at how folks from an emotional standpoint are connecting to content and not just behaviorally. All right. Apart from community building, there are some additional things that we can really reflect on and learn from TikTok. Resource sharing, shared interests. There are a couple examples in this one. We'll look at, you did see an example of music. Music is shared a lot. I can't tell you how many artists that are new to me. I will never say I discovered them because I did not, right? But that are new to me that I learned about via TikTok. And so like I happen to use Spotify as a personal platform for my music intake. I think I've probably doubled the amount of artists I follow just because I was introduced to them through the TikTok community, right? And it's one of the ways, again, there are some problematic pieces to this as well in terms of how artists are leveraging TikTok and how certain things, for instance, I'll give you that. I don't want to dance around this topic, but some artists are being told from their producers that they have to wait till something becomes popular on TikTok before they release it. I find that problematic, but that's a personal aside, right? But at least from the artist community, from lesser known artists, there are so many that are becoming popular through TikTok because folks are engaging with their music, right? So from just a platform standpoint of helping to raise awareness around more independent artists, that's very interesting in terms of how it's forwarding community. And now one of the things related to the music industry that folks are doing, which I find deeply fascinating from a remixing standpoint, is that artists will encourage folks to duet their music. And will even leave out verses. So some of you who are on TikTok might have seen this already, right? But they might sing a verse and then say, okay, now it's your turn, right? And then you'll see them sort of watching and reacting to your video. They'll record themselves as if they're listening to you. But then so much generative music has happened out of collaborations where folks will produce something and in the comment section, like, you have to get this out right now. I want this on Spotify. Like, I need this in my life, right? But it's introducing even the notion of collaborations, and certain songs will have like hundreds of thousands of versions of artists just hopping in and creating new verses. And again, what does this mean for me, right? What would it look like if we were to create a teaching and learning environment such that our students, the learners that we're engaging with, want to do that because the content itself is so compelling that I want to remix. I want to continue to add, continue to extend. And they're making space for me to do it in my way, to create my own verse, so to speak, right? I want you to really lean into that metaphor that we can learn, at least from what's happening in TikTok within the music space. We'll look at one of my favorite personal channels. It's about what I'm calling Excel magic, contracting tips, as well as some graphic design. But these are just some examples of the types of resource sharing that's happening within that space. And many of the examples I started with are also within this realm. All right, we'll look at these. As you can see, we're getting close to the end of my examples. Here's Excel magic. All right, I don't know if you all saw what just happened, but it was magic. Okay, it's very subtle. Watch the columns on the left. Okay, so what they're trying to do right now is painstakingly line by or row by row size them so that all the content can be seen. Right, well, and then now they've actually have an Excel command, and now all of the rows are actually properly sized and consistently sized. So for some of you who are like, yeah, like, of course, everyone knows that. No, not everyone does know that. If you were to explore the comments of this particular video, it's again, that idea of being mind blown. It's like, how did I not know this? Right. And there are things, I'm not an Excel expert by any means. And so I learned from this channel, genuinely. I'm like, oh, that's a super cool thing. And now I get to go and do this. Right. And having command of tools like this, genuinely Excel, ability to do Excel, right? It's a listable skill on people's resumes. And folks are now leveraging tools like TikTok to learn how to engage in tools like Excel. And TikTok is free, right? It is a free platform. I do not have to pay to learn this. Which I also think is very interesting in extending this to a conversation around the open education community. All right, this next one is about contracting tips. So in short, I'll just play a couple of seconds of this one, but this one talks about plunging sinks. So I didn't know you could use a plunger on a sink.
Hey there, hi, my name is Mercury and I am the trans handyman. Let me show you what an accordion plunger can do for your apartment. We're going to fill up our sink with some water, and then if you have an overflow, I don't, you're...
All right, so in short, right, this is very typical of videos related to demos and how-tos, and these are very pervasive on TikTok, right? In very short, this is 1 minute long, which I think is highly relevant. You will learn how to use a plunger on your sink, but along the way, you also learn things like what that additional hole is called, right? And what it's used for, types of plungers to use, why you might want to do it, how much water to put in your sink when you do this, right? So in a very short period of time, they're teaching a whole lot around the use of plungers on your sink, right? I did know you could use a plunger, right? But some folks in the comments, I didn't know that. But in addition to that, how can, in a very short period of time, how could we communicate what we need to? And for those really interested, there's a lot of research out right now about just how long folks will watch back, right? Like I will question, right? And as someone that organizes conferences, this is a 45-minute session. How often do folks genuinely go back and watch those recordings, right? That's a question we really should be thinking about. But in a minute, I will sit and watch like 60 minutes, a whole hour, 3 hours worth of 1 minute videos and walk away feeling I learned a ton. All right, so something for us to really linger on is how long our content is and how we are communicating in the length of time that we are in the videos, or for instance, the other content we might be creating. Is there another strategy for us that we should really be leaning into and learning from tools like TikTok into what is or isn't successful in terms of lengths, even of video content, and structure of how-to or demonstration videos, because they teach a whole lot in a very short period of time. All right, so this one is graphic design, similar in concept, right? This one I'll show just a brief couple of seconds from, but likewise, it's I'm gonna have to restart this one, I think, because it started without me. Oh no, it didn't, perfect. But this one's about a particular tool that's being used.
Working with After Effects can be intimidating, but never fear. My advice is to start by creating a composition that works as a static image on its own. I created this graphic in Photoshop and I made the artboard larger than the frame size.
All right, so similar concept, right? So this particular creator will go through what they did, how they did, sizes, give really practical tips and tricks as to how to do one really small thing. So these are a really great example, in my opinion, of micro learning. So small targeted content that's disseminated in very short bursts for really intentional learning purposes. All right, a couple other things that we'll go through, and I know we're nearing time here. Is that TikTok likewise is a space for storytelling and content presentation. I'll go through the slides and then show you these last two examples here under storytelling, but you can have long running stories that take place over hundreds of TikToks, right? And have folks continually come back and sustain engagement with a creator because they want to know where the story goes next, which I also find really interesting from at least in terms of approaches to storytelling in educational spaces. Do our learners want to come back, right? Are we inviting them back into that space to want to know what's next on the page or what's next in the story? TikTok, genuinely, they did extend their creation to 3 minutes. So you can have, less than a minute up to 3 minutes of content. And then there's another example here of intentional storytelling. And I just love thinking about, like, I want to read an entire book of world history written like this. Like, that is a very intriguing sentiment to me, right? That there's a particular style that the storyteller is taking, or this TikTok creator, that makes them want to read a whole book in this style of communication. Yes, and I agree, Tristan, around like scrolling out or experimenting with 10-minute videos. That's going to be coming, which I'll be very curious about to see if those are successful or not. I'll go through the last couple of slides. We're very near the end, and then show you these last couple of examples, open up for maybe about a minute or two of questions, and we can go from there. But again, my point is TikTok is already a teaching and learning platform. Teaching and learning is happening in TikTok and across TikTok, across time, across space, across communities, across languages. We need to pay attention to that. And hopefully I've made that, at least that invitation for you all to join me in this exploration, is that there's a lot that's happening in this platform, and you don't have to be convinced to use it, but we should be convinced to pay attention to it and to learn from it, to reflect about what's happening in that space, because it very much can be informative to what we do within our own teaching and learning spaces. I did just start us off with at least some reflective questions, just 3 to get us started, right? Is really reflecting on the current state, but also the future state. If we're thinking 2030 and beyond, what does this mean for us? What do consumers want? What do folks look for, right? If we're hearing the sentiment that, why did I even go to college? We should be paying attention to that, particularly those of us that work and have lives based around the college or the university systems, right? So what is happening in this space? Because teaching and learning is already happening. We cannot ignore it. But I can explore, for instance, my own biases around what teaching and learning is and what constitutes teaching and learning, what constitutes who an educator is or who a learner is. I can think about the community-driven education spaces and advocacy spaces. I can also think about community-driven learning spaces as well, and really leaning into that state of reflection. All right, I will, please, this is my invitation, and then I'll show you these last couple of examples. Please reach out to me if you want to continue this conversation. I love it. And traditional age students, I did see that, Mindy. This is lifelong learning happening on TikTok. Regardless of how old you are, we're seeing communities across ages learn and teach and learn from and with each other. So that in and of itself is highly recommended. And I'm not sure if, again, I'm not personally recommending TikTok. I do think it's interesting. I think you can leverage TikTok as a tool if you so want to explore that. What I'm here today to get you to hopefully all think about is we need to learn from TikTok. So in that sense, Mindy, hopefully that's a subtlety here. I'm going to switch my screen share here just so you can enjoy these 2 last examples, and I'll see what kind of time I've got left, Tristan, if at the end here. But here's one storytelling example. I'll show just a bit of this.
I think there's a monster in my room. There are no monsters in your room, honey.
All right, so this is the creator that is long-term storytelling. She developed a variety of characters and now has a whole world based around them, and people are like, what's next, like what's happening? They're very invested. I'm very invested personally, right, in the characters. I want to know what's happening in their lives, right? She's created a whole world around these characters. And then this very last one was the world history book reference.
Asteroid that killed all the dinosaurs, yet their bones stayed. It's just nothing.
Big rock flying the planet.
Right, and so he's playing on a lot of stereotypes and cultural historical references to modes of communication. But point being, right, is he's responding to another clip that someone else had produced and trying to communicate it in a different way, right? And folks are really resonating with that style of communication in the comments. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen share. I'm theoretically at time, not theoretically, I'm technically at time, but I did want to minimally thank you. And again, please, yes, presentation link, that is key. Please reach out. I'd love to connect around this. and invite you in. I love virtual coffee, you name it, or tea, whatever have you. And talking about tools like this, and particularly how we can leverage them to improve our own teaching and learning spaces, and particularly make sure that we are following the trends, even if we're not jumping on the bandwagon ourselves. But nevertheless, we need to follow them. I do have LinkedIn. It's not always updated. So Twitter is sort of the better place to connect with me right now. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. But thank you also, huge shout out to Tristan and the ShapingEDU Space Camp team for this event.